Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be doing a review of Sea of Souls by NC Scrimgeour. Now I want to say thank you to Nicola for sending me an ARC of her book. She has been going on the Twitter grind of trying to promote her book and it worked because it drew my interest. She reached out to me and said, I saw you like the sound of my book. Would you like to read it? And I was like, yes, absolutely. I added it to my wish list, so I'd love to read it. And I loved this book. I loved it. It was amazing. Like, I didn't really know what to expect because the plot sounded quite interesting. The lore sounded really interesting, but I didn't really know whether I would get on with the lore because there's very specific types of lore that I really love. And then the rest I'm just not that interested in. But I just have to say that this is one of those books where I read it and I finished it and I just sat there for a minute and I was like, this is a very, very well written book. So without further ado, let's jump into my review. What is my favourite thing about this book? My favourite thing about this book is the writing. Nicola's writing is absolutely stunning. It's poetic. It flows beautifully. The descriptions were on point and they never felt overdone. I've talked about this before. I hate overly flowery descriptions. I can't do it. I don't like it. I won't do it. But she managed to do it in a way that really worked with the vibe and the atmosphere of the story, whilst not detracting from the vibe and the atmosphere of the story. She was able to strike the balance between being descriptive without making it feel like I was reading a Robert Jordan book, which, as we all know, I've had a lot of issues with in the past. This, without a doubt, was my favourite thing about the book. It was just a delight to read. It was a pleasure to consume. And she has an incredibly bright future ahead of her. I know she's written other books. I think she's written sci-fi books prior to this. But I cannot wait to see how her writing continues to evolve because she's already at the top, in my opinion. Like, it's really, really something to behold. The next thing I really liked was the mythology and the folklore surrounding the story. As I mentioned, folky stories can be very hit and miss for me, but I really liked it in this one. Now, this book centers around the Selkie, and I didn't really know much about them as a fantasy race. Honestly, like, I literally didn't know anything about them. So I really loved learning more about the Selkie and their strengths, their weaknesses, how they operate kind of in social circumstances. Like, I just thought it was really interesting. It was quite a heavy feature of the book. So I was really worried that if I didn't get on with it, it would just completely tarnish my overall experience. But again, she was able to balance it in a way that didn't feel like it was overdone, but whilst also giving me information about this race and these characters that felt very accessible and not exhaustive on my brain. So kudos to her for being able to do that. If you're not interested in Selkie, I would still recommend giving it a go because while it is a big feature of the book, Nicola doesn't go on and on and on about it. It's just kind of there in the background. And I think if you're somebody who doesn't even know what Selkie are, like, you absolutely should read it because it will open up your mind to a different type of mythology and lore that you previously didn't have access to, which I think is really cool. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the character work, which I thought was really strong. I'm just going to talk about one character, and that's our main character, Isla. And she's very, very well written. She's a very strong character. She's one of those characters where a certain type of life was expected of her, but she doesn't want that, and she wants to set her own path. And so a lot of the themes are actually around self-discovery, figuring out your own way, doing things the way that you want to do, which, as we all know, are things that I love. And I just identified with her quite a lot. And I think a lot of people will identify with her for that reason. She's also very, like, physically strong, but she's also very, like, smart and street smart with that. But she also is shown to be flawed. Like, she's a flawed character. She's not perfect and she makes mistakes. And again, I've said this before, I don't like female characters who are perfect at everything and can do everything because it's just not realistic. And Isla is not that. She is a very flawed character who has a lot of insecurity and a lot of issues, but she knows that and she's trying to work through them. And I want to see more of that in my fantasy books and in my books in general. The next thing I'm going to talk about are the themes. The themes were really interesting. I mentioned the whole kind of self-discovery, creating one's own path with the character of Isla. I think there's a really interesting theme around kind of race and discrimination and putting our differences aside to fight for the greater good. And I think, you know, there's this kind of constant battle between the humans and the Selkie, and it brings up a lot of questions around kind of mistreatment of different types of cultures and peoples, and I really like that. I think it was a really clever way to do it. The other thing that I really liked about this was the kind of friends in unexpected places trope. Like, I really like that. I think, again, Nicola did a really good job of representing the bonds that are made during this book, but then also the bonds that are broken throughout the duration of this book. And I won't say any more than that because I don't want to spoil it. The last thing I will say is that this is a pretty dark book. This is definitely dark fantasy. And I think a lot of people who like grimdark, dark fantasy are going to eat this book up. Again, it is pretty violent. I wouldn't say it's violence for violence sake, which I think is really important. I think it's a very effective way of telling the story. And I really enjoyed the darker elements and the grittier elements of this book. I know for a fact that a lot of you who watch my channel for darker recommendations will love this book, so definitely consider picking it up. The other thing I will mention is that Nicola is a self-published author, which there's always this kind of perceived, you know, lack of quality when it comes to self-publishing for some reason. I think that is starting to happen less now, which is great. But the quality of this book is insane. Like, this could very easily be picked up by Gollancz or Angry Robot or any one of the other like fantasy publishers, because it's just exquisitely written, like exquisitely written. And I know that so many of you are going to love it. So I really hope that you give it a chance and you pick it up because it's fantastic. It comes out I'm recording this video in early August. So by the time this video goes out, this book should be out. I will post Nicola's links down below so that you can check it out. I don't normally rate self-published books, but what I will tell you is that I gave this book a very, very, very high rating, like a very high rating. And I even go as far as to say that this has been one of the highlights for me this year. It was just a very memorable experience and I loved everything about it. And with that in mind, I implore you to check it out. Check down the links that I put down below. And if you have any questions about it, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, folks. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.